Welcome to the Intelligence Amplifiers, podcast that celebrates the people who make the intelligence a collective superpower. In every episode, we uncover the stories of learning and development leaders who amplify knowledge, break down silos, and empower teams to thrive. These are the enablers of insight, the ones turning expertise into action and shaping the future of work by ensuring that the right knowledge reaches the right people at the right time. So, if you're ready to explore how the intelligence is amplified and shared across organizations, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Hello, today we have Maier joining us in the latest episode of Intelligence Amplifiers. And how's it going, Brick?
It's going well. I'm excited to have a chat.
Awesome. Yeah. So I know you most recently you did some amazing work at Amazon in knowledge management, and then you're at Heat Spring now, and you're doing some really cool stuff with AI and learning, and we'll get to that. But I wanted to kind of start in your earlier career. You started in teaching, right? Like that was like one of your initial sort of ways into how people learn. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, that was foundational to kind of what I'm doing now. And it's going back a bit, but yeah, I was a classroom teacher in inner city Los Angeles. I taught middle school, and that was really formative to just kind of understanding how to build a relationship with students. And then the courses that I taught, that's funny. The subject I taught was English language arts, and I didn't know it at the time, but I kind of developed a kind of a passion for storytelling and writing, and in helping my students love writing and telling stories. And I was always looking for different ways to prompt their imagination. And this was early 2000s, so there wasn't much technology in the classroom. I had overhead projectors, and I would just put up images up there, and I would ask them to kind of look at that image and think like what's happening there, and like start to describe things. And that storytelling was expanded into kind of digital media, and trying to figure out, like I knew my students loved, it's funny, we'd have these like video projects, and they're almost more interested in the outtakes than the video. And so they would like, it was a funny dynamic, but I saw their interest in kind of using video to tell a story, and I saw how inefficient it was. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of kind of standing around and changing locations. And so after I finished teaching, I thought about that core idea that I saw in my classroom, and I tried to simplify it. And I went on a research grant on a Fulbright in Ireland, and I was a researcher in residence at Dublin's Institute of Technology. And I went with a really simple approach. I saw that in history, there were these paper theaters, paper puppets. And it's literally as simple as you're thinking. It's like holding, like it's a little diorama, and we would build these little scenes. And it was amazing what would happen. I mean, with students, with adults, like there was a powerful thing happening, and they would project a story onto those characters. And I built a whole curriculum out of that. And the result of that research is that I moved back from Ireland to LA, and I started tinkering with this kit, and I kind of put on an entrepreneurial hat. And I had a Kickstarter, and I had this little tabletop movie making box, and I had little 3-point lighting, and I had characters and scenes, and it was a successful Kickstarter. It helped me like launch this kit, and I started working with Sundance and LACMA's Art and Film Institute, and I became a researcher there, and I started building out this much larger storytelling curriculum with like digital media, and now training in teachers. And the technology evolved, and I started with these big chunky cameras, mm-hmm. and we would have a cable connected to iMovie, and it was like Firewire into the movie, and we'd be filming live. And then phones came out and tablets came out, and we could kind of shoot, edit, and share all from the device. Mm-hmm. And so I did that for a number of years and brought that up to Seattle. But there was an interesting kind of unexpected overlap, and that was like my intro to, I guess, bigger technology companies. And that was, I was doing a digital storytelling. I was doing these workshops up in Seattle, and I was like, I kind of wrote this syllabus for like, and then we can do stop motion animation, and then we can do time lapse, we can do hyperlapse, we can do this paper stuff. And I was just thinking about all these different things. And there was someone on the board of this nonprofit who happened to work at Microsoft, who was a general program manager for a new Microsoft Office 365 tool called Sway. And it was an interesting kind of digital scrolly telling, parallax, drop in your media, text, audio, video, animations. And so he saw what I was developing. He's like, would you be interested in piloting this tool that we're working on in this kind of after school program? It'd really help our UX researchers. And it kind of opened up this whole world of that kind of digital storytelling. So it was a funny arc to start from teaching to kind of end up doing this kind of research and working with the Microsoft folks. And that went really well. And then they invited me to build some tutorials for their software that were actually embedded in the UI. It was really interesting experience for me to kind of go to Microsoft's tools and then to go into the dropdown and see me like introducing, 5 new ways to use this and use it this way and use it that way. And it was fun. It was an intense experience. And it was like, it kind of introduced me to kind of the workflow and the deadline kind of driven world of Microsoft. And I thought, I think I could do this. And so I started looking around Seattle and I started looking for, I was like, there aren't teaching jobs in technology. It's like, how do I take this like mix of filmmaking, teaching, and research? And so I found a senior program manager role at Amazon on a knowledge management team. And it was a funny experience. I felt like David Attenborough was narrating my first couple of weeks there, where it's like, I totally had imposter syndrome. Is like, I was like, the teacher enters into the classroom and isn't, like I'm going into these conference rooms and I don't even know where to sit. I don't know. Like, it's like, I felt very much like a fish out of water, but my manager is great. The onboarding was super helpful. And my team was like really unique and kind of a special experience at Amazon. It allowed me to kind of be a fish out of water and like kind of approach things from oblique angles and try new things. And I don't know. I wasn't sure if I was doing everything right at first. I was like, do I know Excel well enough? It seems like everyone knows Excel really well here. And I learned that, and I learned to kind of think in kind of more data-driven outcomes. But then I also kind of was encouraged and fostered to like try and solve this problem of like rapid training on products that were always changing using video, but in a way that had to be built faster. And so then I kind of built out this like internal self-directed learning library using these kind of simplified toolkits. And it wasn't paper-based movie making. We'd kind of, that had left. Yeah. But there were elements of like rapid simplification, kind of direct to tape, record it live, kind of like how do you work with subject matter experts who are kind of pinched for time to kind of distill their knowledge into something that can be consumed by kind of an operations team that just needs to know the core things that changed and know that like this video is relevant for 2 months, 3 months, maybe just to the launch. So these videos were not high production value. They were made well and communicated, but they were made quickly. And that ended up being successful. I think we ended up producing several hundred of those across different products. And, these were all internal facing things at Amazon. That was the other thing that struck me, was that at a company that's as big as Amazon, my knowledge of them prior to joining was that I bought stuff and it showed up at my house.
Yeah.
And now there's just this wide landscape and there's all these internal pieces of software that they were always iterating on. And that's kind of where I sat in that knowledge management kind of side. Anyway, that was, I just was talking for 5 minutes, 8 minutes there. I should take a breath and pause.
I love it. I love this arc of, you started with masters in education, and you found tools to do your storytelling, to basically educate people, kids, middle school, and kind of leaned on this sort of like puppet kind of, kid-based video production early on. And so there's this kind of common thread of like tinkering with various technologies to do a storytelling in service of education and communicating the knowledge. Like that's kind of like what's intriguing to me around your arc. And you just kind of kept tinkering with that. It started with a paper-based puppets, and then evolved into more of a video production. Then we'll get into AI and all that. And I love that aspect of that, and kind of like being willing and courageous and creative to kind of try different things and see where that lands you. I also love this aspect that I heard in your story, which is about iterating. And we used to say when I was at Twitter, we would also create a lot of courses, but they were ad hoc and quick to develop. And we always used to say that, perfect gets in a way of good enough, right? And for internal, it was more important to be good enough and rapid and just in time, and like just launch it and keep iterating on it, versus the traditional sort of L&D sometimes is like, well, let's make it perfect. We have 2 courses to develop, 3 courses, and they better be really, really polished. Versus when it comes to, internal engineering specifically stuff, you need hundreds, and they need to be like in time is more important than perfect. So what was that experience like for you? Like, did you ever have that like sort of fighting the perfection versus just shipping good enough?
Yeah, that was an interesting experience, specifically at Amazon. So I was on multiple teams over my 6.5 years there, and I had that initial team was a mixture of people that had that ethos of like, iterate, try it out. Let's look at it from this angle. It's 80%. I think that's good enough. And then iterate. And then I joined another team, and it was like filled with like lots of talented folks. But I noticed a culture shift within some of the folks who really had a strong perfectionist kind of bent. And so they really wanted everything to be like buttoned up. And I think we stressed each other out a little bit, because I would see these templates they had developed that looked like battleships in terms of like, they were so organized and like every detail down to the grain was thought about. And I was like, this is important for a certain kind of training. I think we need to build things faster. And I had this kind of back and forth where I was like this kind of Pareto, probably, I don't know if Pareto is the right one, but like, I was like, how do we reduce this by 80%? Like reduce this template from this thing to a quick start guide that can be scanned in 2 pages, but maintain a quality level, but kind of increase the cadence. And that was tricky because I also worked with folks who were experts in their tools, and they knew the Adobe suite of, building images really well. They understood editing video, which is really slow, and they really were comfortable inside some of the e-learning authoring tools. And I think I kind of surprised them when I was like, I don't really use those when I build things. And my natural inclination is, if we do use those tools, my SCORM package is going to be like very simple. It's going to be like video with the wrapper that you need to kind of capture start, end, basic metrics on engagement, and then see if it's successful, have enough, signals in there to know if it's a defective training or where we can improve it. But like, so yeah, that was interesting. And so I bias towards iterate quickly and have a minimum threshold for quality so that it's not distracting the learner. But in certain environments, the speed is what you need, is more important. And I think some of those, like ADP had averaging 70 hours of work to create 1 hour of e-learning, which I think can be true, but just wouldn't work in the world we're in. It's like, we don't have 70 hours to put toward 1 hour.
Yeah. I remember you mentioned when you and I spoke, you mentioned you chose the nimble route versus the perfect route, right? It was about this iteration, this experimentation iteration, nimbleness, I guess, would capture that. And I wonder, you also mentioned, I believe that at Amazon, I know Amazon is fairly distributed and there are lots of sort of like autonomy across teams. You ended up in a knowledge management team and not necessarily an L&D team, right? What's the difference there? Like, how much does that matter?
That was something that I didn't realize how different culturally those two teams could be. The L&D team had a collection of folks that had kind of a specific background in authoring tools, and some teachers as a background, but kind of there was more of a templated kind of SOP driven, get it in dialed in and follow the ADDIE process and follow it through to completion so that we have a consistent product.
Yep.
And that knowledge management team was a collection of people that I was the only teacher. People came in from a lot of different backgrounds, and our title, this might just be unique to Amazon, but we were senior program managers, which is this kind of like fungible job title, but it kind of can capture different experiences and put them together with their skills to do something, versus the L&D team, which is more rigid, learning designer, learning experience designer. And I also will say, and this is hard because I was in different organizations within Amazon, so the culture was different between those two. I don't know, like, you can leave this in, I'll just say it, but I felt like I had more respect as a senior program manager on the knowledge management team. And I felt more like a peer when I was working with TPMs, product managers, SDEs, the BI team. I had the flexibility to interact with all of those people, and I did. It's really interesting. This is an anecdote that I didn't share with you on our previous call, but I think it's interesting. I ended up sharing a wall with this data engineer. He'd been at Amazon for 20 years, had 2 DoorDesk awards, sat in a room with Bezos when it was first starting out. He had these crazy stories of like how duct tape and bubblegum the early days were. And he lives inside SQL. And so he could just he was pulling data. He's getting data organized for everyone. And what I noticed, I shared this half wall with him. And what I noticed is this steady train of people coming in, and they're like, "Hey, John, I got a question about this." And he would just kind of push his keyboard back. He'd roll his chair back. He's like, "Yeah, what do you got?" And 3 times a day, this guy was just answering, mentoring, and teaching informally. And I'm sitting here in this training and knowledge management team. We're trying to build training and trying these things. And I'm like, John is doing more to help this organization than, on some days, definitely than what we're doing. Because we're building this formalized training, and we kind of say, you have to take it and finish it by this date. And John's just like, yeah, let me know if that works and come back if it doesn't. And he just kept doing this. And so I remember asking his manager, because John was like a force multiplier for the organization, but he just sat in his little desk and had like an old laptop, and asked his managers, what do you notice when people are coming back? And what's the difference when people come through? And he had a really good insight, and it's like an anecdote that I take with me. It's like how can you tell when someone's growing in their role versus going along? He's like, they'll come in and they'll ask a question for help, and John can help them, and they'll go away. And then usually it's connected to an MBR or QBR, some monthly report. They got to get it done. They're solving a problem. They'll come back. He's like, if their question is the same question, they're just looking for help. But the people who are growing and learning have a different set of questions each time, and they're going off and learning and coming back. Anyway, that was really special for me. And I saw John doing that, and I had the flexibility to work with them in knowledge management as a program manager. I felt a little more boxed in on that other one. I felt like I was on a team, and the engineers are the engineers, and it's their time is valuable, and we don't want to distract them. And the TPMs were like, don't talk to them. And I was like, oh, this is different. And I had I think that's because I was one of the more senior people on that team. I kind of just still set up meetings with people and would still just kind of talk with them. But that was an interesting cultural shift, and I wouldn't have had that perspective unless I was on those 2 different teams.
Yeah. It reminds me. I mean, I draw so many parallels. When we got into Twitter, we were an acquisition, right? And we became Twitter University, and it was for engineers. And so my first discovery was that great. They just spend all this money getting us in to enable engineers to do their best work. And yet what engineers needed was this internal knowledge of how do we work here and how does this thing work? Like nobody can any longer understand this, big platform. But we were the last people to be able to teach that, right? We just got into the building, right? Like I had no idea how Twitter works or how we work at Twitter. And so my big realization was the job isn't to be a know-it-all. The job was to enable others to do it at scale, right? So you have this like old-timers, like you mentioned, and then how do you enable them to share their knowledge, but do it at scale so they're not repeating the same thing over and over again? And that became a really interesting insight, which is very different than a traditional sort of L&D where it's like, like you create one course and then you go teach that, and you're the subject matter expert and teacher and all that, versus enabler of let 1,000 flowers bloom from subject matter.
Yeah, exactly. So when I saw what John was doing, and I saw the need that the organization had to develop this like deeper insight and expertise with SQL, and the queries that some of these folks were writing were, I don't know, there's a lot, and you could get, and John's expertise was like efficiency and cutting off the tail and writing these like crisp queries. And so I invited John. It's like, would you be willing to? And I worked with him to build this simple, like, it's basically like him lecturing. I was like, I want to keep this as frictionless as possible. He's at his strength when he's just like typing with the screen recording, with him narrating what he's doing. And I was like encouraging him to like, talk through your thought process here. And I recorded that, and I had people who needed that knowledge there. And then I just chunked that up and like put them up on like our internal version of YouTube and try to get those out in front of the people. Cause like I knew that if they could see his thought process and his problem solving, that like just that would help them. Cause like, these folks were writing queries that might take 6 hours or overnight. Mm-hmm. And John would look at it and be like, that's, and I couldn't tell any of these things, but he could just see like, well, that's going to take forever because of that filter. And you should have done this there. And he would get it so that he was getting their queries to run much faster. And he had them like share their queries in a way that was like usable and shareable. And that's like these folks that, like, to your point, they were new to Amazon. They were coming in with their prior knowledge. They didn't know. And so they were just kind of basically like emailing queries back and forth or posting them on internal wikis. He's like, this is going to be a kind of a disaster. Mm-hmm. If you're going to really kind of like, what you want to do is refine this so everyone can use it and become stable, put it over here so that it's logged and there's a version history. And it seems simple at the time, but I think it's easy for organizations to kind of, or little teams to kind of build habits that weren't meant to be bad, but just it evolved into that. And so that's an example of like, I went straight to the SME. Mm-hmm. I worked with them in the simplest way to develop something, and it didn't touch storyline. I was like, at no point will I put this into SCORM package because it just needs to get out to the people to see it. This was unique to like, I think coding and scripting in particular they don't need SCORM. They probably shouldn't be in SCORM. So just like give them a video, have the expert narrate it, and they'll pick it up. And that worked out well. That turned into kind of a SAT Foundations in SQL course that I worked with a couple BI people to create.
Yeah, and that's another, like, I remember when you and I talked about that, you called it out specifically. I'm just kind of reiterating what you just said, but it wasn't about creating SCORM files. It was about quick and dirty videos that resemble a YouTube sort of shorts almost. And that's also a twist on a traditional L&D, which would lean more on that polished SCORM experience, which is not what would work in a rapidly changing technical organization where you just want to disseminate knowledge and make it easy for SMEs to just like record something, like make it super easy for them. Like they don't need to prepare, 70 hours to create an hour of training. They just hit, capture my screen, look what I'm doing, and here comes a quick and dirty YouTube style short video that is much more impactful and much more in time than some polished score and file. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of reiterate that. I thought that was super interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love this. At Amazon, you discovered iterating and experimenting, and it was culturally welcomed, and you had definitely you were riding a rocket ship, and things were changing, and lots of very smart people that you were enabling and doing that at scale. And then you went from Amazon to HeatSpring, which is tiny in comparison. You work with large companies, right? Like you have very large customers, but it's tiny in comparison. So I'm curious, what was the same, what was different, like both culturally and in the problem domain that you were solving, from going from a giant tech company to a much smaller startup?
Yeah, the biggest overlap. The founder of HeatSpring, Brian Hayden, and I began chatting. I actually heard one of the program managers who I work with now on a podcast, and I was like, she's cool. Like she has a really good approach to like teaching and what's important. And like she was coming from a perspective of like really like building out the skills and like creating an environment for like people who are new to solar installation, to like give them the tools to succeed. And I think in that podcast, it was really about like helping women be successful in solar installation. And she just like this, everything she's saying is just resonating. So then I reached out to Brian and we had a chat, and it was interesting. Like we like immediately bonded on, this like faster is better.
Yep.
And I just like, this is the right cultural place for me to kind of iterate and tinker. And that, I'd been developing an interest in renewable energy, and HeatSpring is a renewable energy training platform where people can like earn certifications in solar or heat pumps or HVAC related, geothermal. There's like a couple different domains that we have. And I was like, this is kind of perfect for me. I get to like pivot, like take the skills that I brought from Amazon, which is more data analytics and like understanding like the consumption metrics and if the training is successful, but then apply it to this new domain, but do it in kind of a rapid iteration. I saw on their platform that they were kind of a video first custom built LMS, and it was slick. It was fast. The back end was like, there were 2 week sprints. It's like funny to go from this big, huge company and really complex software and software that you never see that just keeps things optimizing, and to kind of work to implement this one optimization might be a team of 20 SDEs working for 6 months, and it has major implications for the larger business. But here I went over to a smaller developer team. We would, put into our Kanban board, like, what do we think this feature, like, why would we want to add this feature to the platform? What could it enable? We kind of interrogate that a little bit. And then we put it into the sprint. And then, 2 weeks later, we're like looking at in our staging, a pretty good prototype of it. And I recognize the complexity of those two are different, but it was so refreshing for me to kind of go into this environment where I could like have an idea and then bring it up to Brian or the developers on the sprint call. And, in some cases a month later, see it in our production. It's like, that's amazing. And so that's been really fun for me because I've grown in kind of a product manager hat, I would say. In a small company, you kind of do a lot of different things. And it's fun for me to kind of come up with a feature and then kind of have to own it as it's working its way through and QAing it with instructors if it's something that impacts their workflow, or working with SMEs on things. So it's like I get to do a lot of different things, and I have the freedom to test things out quickly. And then the AI stuff has really been super. The timing of leaving Amazon when ChatGPT started to emerge was really beneficial because of info security concerns inside a big company. You're not going to use the state of the art that's out and about, like that you might see people experimenting with. And that's valid reasons for security. Like totally understand that, but the internal tools will just look different and the processes would be different. So I've been able to be in this kind of sandbox and just like tinker and try and figure out like what's the signal in this, and what's the hype? Because there's so much hype right now. It kind of, I think I joked with you that it felt like there are elements of the AI hype that remind me of like crypto bros. Mm-hmm. Like they like went from meme coins and ugly sweaters to like now they've got like an AI rapper that does a call to ChatGPT. I was like, oh, it's just so similar, but there's something really meaningful that we can plug into that can help improve our like learning. So anyway, that's kind of where I've been having a lot of fun at HeatSpring.
Yeah, I heard autonomy in all that, right? So you basically you jump from Amazon to a startup, and you got to even more autonomy, and you continued tinkering, and it happened to align with this macro trend of AI is coming out, and tinkering with that at a large company might be harder because of infosec and issues like that. And so a smaller startup kind of allowed you to even tinker more and have even a higher level of autonomy along the way. And I love how your tinkering keeps producing interesting results. So it was the YouTube shorts, the internal videos at Amazon. And now with AI at HeatSpring, I know you've stumbled upon some really meaningful usages of AI in learning. You had some success with that. I know you have a workshop. You've given it to DOE, I believe, and other places like that. You and I touched on using AI to analyze transcripts and create assessments, things like that. What else have you discovered? Like what's the rubber meets the road? Because we keep talking. Everyone's curious about AI, and there's some cute AI applications like create me a title. Like those are like like saves me 5 seconds, no big deal. But there's some really meaningful AI applications that are like, wow, this actually unlocks a whole new world of possibilities. Do you mind speaking to that a little bit, what you've discovered?
Yeah. And it's interesting because I totally agree that there's like the equivalent of like a gas station tchotchke. Yeah. If there's a novelty factor to like it kind of jingles and it looks colorful and it's like fast, or it's like, I didn't know I could do that. And that's not going to change anyone's workflow. And so where I went, and my framing device was like the active versus passive use of AI. And I think as AI becomes ubiquitous in our assistants and tools, it's just there, and we might use it kind of just passively and kind of a quick chat. And where I've learned the most was like really kind of thinking about the process of building something that is useful for a learner and figuring out where that tool can help speed that up. And what emerged was that these tools were really good at analyzing a knowledge repository. Mm-hmm. And the insight for me, and the one that, when we work with subject matter experts, they might be authors of a book or a company that has proprietary information that's not public. We had to kind of assure them that this wasn't leaking out. It's private. And so we kind of went with a privacy first approach where we like, okay, give us your knowledge repository. This could be PDFs and PowerPoint decks or books. It's all, and kind of want to emphasize is like the copyright holders are giving us permission to use these tools. We're not like, that's a messy area, and AI can make it very easy to just create stuff. So we're using their material with their permission, but we had these tools focus in on a specific document set. And I think that this has different terms. The terms of art are changing every 6 months. I think RAG was one that showed up when it's a really big knowledge repository and you were kind of building a custom pipeline to really look at a lot of stuff. And like baby RAG, I think is just something I've heard called like not grounded knowledge, which is like, I got a folder of stuff. I only want you to look at that. Do not reference your trained model. Don't go out to the internet to fill in gaps. And we've found really consistent results with that for certain kinds of content. We feel comfortable. And so an example would be, we worked with an author who wrote this battery energy storage system book. These are like, these like utility scale battery energy storage system, but like they look like shipping containers, and they're just like, they're stabilizing the grid at critical times for when solar is shining and it can charge it up and use it at night. Really important, really popular topic right now. And we had an expert write a book on that that's turning out to be a really popular book. And he created came to us and he's like, I'd like to build a kind of a foundations course based on this book. And I was like, this is a great test for AI. And so what we did is we had it analyze this book chapter by chapter. And one of the workflows I've developed is like, look at this book and start, I'm applying my kind of learning design brain. So I was like, I want to have great terminal learning objectives, enabling learning objectives. I want to like start from like this high level document framework that has those. So we make sure that like anything we're creating is like teaching to those. I also want to like look at that book and then start extracting knowledge check questions that map to those objectives. It's like in learning the design, you really want to like have like, it's like enabled backward design where you could like start with the assessments, connect them to learning objectives, and like have the content be right in the middle, and it just sped everything up. And I can come up with this script that would look at that and then build out like in as fast as it takes to run a Python script, a 35 slide deck that had text on screen, speaker notes, image recommendations. And that just helped the author look at that and be like, oh, that's a really great summary of this concept of this chapter. That saves some time for me to now go in and like align the images or tune it. Or he'd look at some of them and be like, I don't need that one. I've got that deck. And we discard what was not needed, and we honed in and like iterated on the stuff that was helpful, and it just sped everything up. So that's one that we did. And that's kind of a workflow that kind of emerged as being really helpful. Just like it's really good at analyzing kind of a knowledge repository, and it's getting better at multimodal. It'll take in video inputs. It can take in audio transcripts. It's best when you can get it into a text form, but the image, the Claude is getting really good now at analyzing the images inside a PDF. And we work with a lot of engineers, and we might have like a single line diagram that's of this, like how a microgrid works. And I was like testing it. I was like, can you see this? And I was like, analyze the single line diagram for wiring up a heat pump. And it looked at it and it broke it down to a step by step. And so I was like, this is amazing, because now you can take that technical documentation that's internal to a company that's like, it's coming from the engineer. And now you're turning it into customer education that's like step by step. Let's walk you through this wiring diagram that may not be, you may not know how to read this. And I would like, important part of all of this is a human in the loop, expert in the loop, verify this so it's not hallucinating. Like, are we reading this correctly? Because when you get into something like a wiring diagram, you don't want to just give it to somebody like, plug the red cord into that one and turn on the switch. It's like, you want to make sure that everything is safe. And that's where we've kind of started to like have an internal list of like areas where we're comfortable using the AI, always with a human in the loop. And then areas where we're starting to get like, almost like it tips over to like, it needs to be human centered. And that gets into like electrical safety. And we want that knowledge. Someone who's been a master electrician for 30 years. That's the kind of knowledge that we trust when they're teaching electrical safety. Whereas like certainly others were more willing to use AI. Does that make sense? That we kind of have this like where we're not quite comfortable using it, mostly for the health and safety of the student.
I'm thinking like bomb squads and like
yeah.
The blue wire. No, it's the red wire.
yeah. It's like, we're gonna like, hey ChatGPT, I have the wires. Is it the red or the blue one? And you're like, yeah. So I think there's a limit to like when the safety becomes an issue.
Yeah,
we take that pretty seriously.
Yeah. But joke aside, I think what you talk about is this. It's almost like the holy grail, right? Like you have a body of technical knowledge. We may come in the form of a book or a manual or something like that, and you can now convert this automatically. And we'll double click on automatically, but you can convert this into like an instruction manual for learning purposes. It can be like a learning course or almost, you can also convert it into assessment, so you can assess the knowledge. So you can kind of start from one body of work and create all these artifacts that you need for teaching and certification and things like that. And I put kind of like an asterisk on automatically. I think what you mentioned is with a human in the loop, right? Yeah. So AI gets you so far along, but then you're empowering like instructional designers or humans or you to kind of verify the result and be way more productive along the way and remove all the toil work of actually doing the conversion yourself, right?
Yeah. I kind of would joke that like absent of automation, the human is that kind of the last mile, copy, paste, click, transfer file over. Like I'm definitely, as I'm building a course with a subject matter expert, it's shrinking the time, but there isn't a big green button on next to my computer that says make course and makes course. In fact, I'm very suspicious of anyone that claims they have a tool that automatically generates these things. And I've seen some of them, and I put them in kind of the more novel, more hype than use, or the enthusiasm for the output outweighs the evidence that it's effective. Yeah. So it's like, it's kind of like, I dismiss it. But human in the loop, there is kind of a last mile. I'm in there moving things around. It speeds up my workflow, but I also have kind of what feels like a Rube Goldberg machine process. It's in my mind and I document it internally for our team, and that's always changing. That's my own internal SOP document for like, am I using this tool? And, when Claude 3.5 upgrades to 3.7 and they add in agentic behavior and deep thinking, I have to go and reevaluate what we were doing before and see what it can do now. And so that was in my latest, like last week, I was tinkering with like, how big can this context window be? Like, what can you really make in one shot? And how good is it? And that's kind of where it's been fun for us to see it grow in its capability and speed up our workflow even more. Still vetting it, but they just keep getting better.
Yeah. So the common thread is still tinkering and figuring out how to make humans that are, to use the term amplifying intelligence, more effective, like people like you. And I'm curious, what do you see on the horizon? Like, what are you excited about that's coming up next? For you, at least.
Yeah, it's funny. There's like the short-term horizon. And then there's the like existential, I take a walk around the block horizon, which is like, what does it mean to learn? So I'm not going to try and answer the what does it mean to learn question, because I do think several years from now, learning will look very different. And that's where I spend time wondering, like, how do we like update our systems to like meet students where they're at? But I think in the short term, we have been very impressed with and gotten feedback from both instructors and the students and like other L&D teams. So we work with a lot of renewable energy companies that have L&D teams internal. And when they started to see the knowledge checks that we're building out automatically, I think you referenced that we have this feature that we rolled out a couple months ago that analyzes our transcripts, sends it off to an API call. We have a custom engineered prompt that returns knowledge checks. And the vetting of that was like, here's an expert in solar installation, and we just had AI analyze their course and come back with some questions. And then not only that, this person in particular was an expert exam writer for these national certifications. So this person is like, thinks about exam questions and looked at these and thought, these are a really good first pass. Like, I'm going to tweak and tune this a little bit, but like, this is great. This saves us so much time. And the L&D folks were like, this is really powerful form of assessment, because assessments are so slow to make. Yeah. And so that was a big unlock for us. And right now in our short term, we're looking at like, what is the Swiss Army knife for assessments as a tool where we can like adapt it and turn it into this to improve learning. Spaced repetition flashcards, or what do we do this for like assessments to look at knowledge gaps and so we can, now that we've got this core kind of engine working, we're excited to take that business logic and extend it into different parts. And I mean, it's funny. Like this last week or in the evening, I'll let like my subconscious iterate on something. I was like, I wonder, this is what I want. So I went over to Replit and I just typed, I went to Claude and I was like, create a simplified business requirements document for this feature set. And I look at it and I say, no, that's too complex and we don't need that. And doesn't need to be all that. So I just strip it down. It's like, I really just want a prototype, but help me with that. And then I bring that BRD from Claude and I bring over to Replit, which is funny because I think Replit uses Claude on the back end so they're all talking to each other. But then I was like, can you build out this idea? And it just built this prototype and we looked at it and I did a screen recording and I just did a little kind of 2 or 3 minute narration of it with the team and sent it to them. And it was like, that was enough for them to understand a direction, discuss it. And it now could be something that we put into our sprint. Maybe not, like we have to figure out the prioritization, but like that to me is like what this like really fun short-term cycle of like, here's this feature we rolled out. We think we can extend it. We know that people are interested in it. What would it look like? And so, that's like short-term assessments. Longer term, I come at it from 2 different perspectives. One, I'm fascinated by the people who are thinking about how we get people to be like, right now we kind of deliver courses where the learning is kind of, you can be passive and it comes at you, you consume it, and we pause for a knowledge check and you answer it and you're maybe actively learning there and we see that signal. I think in the future, the people who are going to learn the fastest and get the most out of like AI tools or anything, just any domain, are the ones that have some kind of built-in deep focus and kind of like a font of like curiosity toward a topic. And that's where I take my walks around the block and like, when we have 10 tabs open on our computer or we're on our phone and it's like, this is a purpose-built device that distracts us with notifications. And it's like, what is that deep focus? And how do we encourage learning when like anything that you want to learn can be taught to you if you have the focus and you're asking like the right follow-up questions? So that's where I kind of like, we're at work. That's not in our sprint. We haven't built that into our system. But I think about like Andre Karpathy, who I have a lot of respect for in the AI world, thinks a lot about like learning new concepts and how, like what it takes to learn, and that it doesn't necessarily be a fun, bite-sized module. Like it shouldn't be this little snack thing. And it's like, I'm conflicted by that because I know that like breaking up things into modules helps people engage with chunks and re-engage. But his point is like deep learning and focus comes with kind of like really engaging your brain on something. And I think that's going to be whoever can like figure out how to encourage folks to do that in a distracted world is really going to help people excel in their growth, in their skill. And sometimes that's intrinsic, that's internal to the person.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that's a debate that we have at each spring. It's like, because some students will really just get a lot out of a course. Others will really struggle to finish it. And it's like, what can we do to support? Yeah. They can't, it comes back to that, what we noticed at Amazon, the people that come back with different questions after they've learned something, that they're internally building out their own schema and then they're using experts to grow further. But then there's other people who don't do that and they kind of stay here. And I think AI is going to take those folks that can like be curious and learn independently and then seek expert opinion. They're going to grow so fast in a domain. And I think a lot about how schools and like in an elementary, high school, how we can encourage that. So that's a different topic, but.
Interesting. Yeah. I heard growth mindset, and it really is about the mindset, right? It's the curiosity, almost like a love for a problem or subject matter.
Yeah.
That's what I heard in that. That's super interesting. Thank you for sharing. Brick, I have one final question. Looking at your career, you started masters in education, tinkering through storytelling and video production to communicate and educate to AI and kind of exploring where the puck is going. Looking back, what's one piece of advice you would give to your younger self when you were starting out?
So I don't know how I would distill this into a simple statement, but I think the advice to my younger self is to trust yourself when you're going into something unknown, and to minimize the voice that is telling you that maybe you don't know enough to be a part of that thing. Because I think what I've learned in that arc is that at every point where I was a little out of my element, maybe didn't have all the information at the time, that I was able to fill it in, and I could like keep doing it. And it's like, it's okay if you don't know everything now. Just keep being curious and like approaching things from that oblique perspective, which is hard advice to follow. And I've had this like path of a butterfly for a career. It's like I didn't have this like, like, and then I'll do this, and then I'll do this, and I'll know exactly, I can tell you, 10 years from now, this is what I'll be doing. I just, I kind of like would like move into different domains with a curiosity and not having all the information. It's okay to not have all the information. You'll fill it in. That's kind of hard advice to follow for a young person, because it's scary to not know.
Yeah. I heard courage and versus fear in that, and just trusting the universe. So yeah. Well, thank you. That was beautiful. Super appreciate you sharing your wisdom, and I got really inspired from all of that. So thank you very much. Thanks, Brick, and great to have you on the show.
Thank you, Marco. This is a lot of fun.
Awesome. That's it for this episode of the Intelligence Amplifiers. If you like what you've heard, be sure to subscribe or follow so you don't miss out on the future episodes. And if you're interested in being a guest or have a question, check out the episode description for how to reach us. Also, don't forget to check out PlusPlus, the platform that makes collective intelligence at scale possible. Find out more at plusplus.co. Thank you for listening, and until next time, keep amplifying.